Fire Emblem, when you think about it, is a lot like Taco Bell. For the past several decades, they have been serving the same 10 ingredients, and every few years, they'll find a new, slightly different way to give us those same 10 ingredients. And just like Taco Bell, I am an absolute slut for every time Fire Emblem does it. One of the most popular ingredients on the Fire Emblem menu is the Camus archetype, the concept of a knight loyal to the end for his or her kingdom, dying against the player on the field of battle. People really love a good tragic villain, and honestly, any character that can say some iteration of "in another life we would be friends" is sure to be a hit with audiences. But Fire Emblem has been going on for over 30 years, so you would think that Camus himself, the first member of this trope, would be one of the weaker ones. After all, they've had plenty of time to perfect the formula. But no, Camus is actually a really good character. A damn good one, in fact. You could make the argument that he's just as good, if not better, than all of the ones that come after him. An argument I'm going to show off today. So come on in and enjoy a video on the Black Knight. No, not that one. Also, not that one. Okay, Mince isn't even from Fire Emblem. Yes, that one. That Black Knight. Man, Fire Emblem really likes the title Black Knight, huh? Just like I really like it when you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. I know asking for that before the video even starts is kinda lame, but it really helps, and also, I'm not asking, I'm threatening. If you don't like and subscribe to my channel, I will be that van in front of you in the McDonald's drive-thru, ordering breakfast for a family of 8 when all you wanted was a small coffee.
There is no meme. This is just a threat.
In an effort to not be one of those character analysis videos that's actually a plot summary in a trench coat, I'm gonna give the abridged version of Camus' backstory so we can start getting to the good stuff. Camus is a high-ranking knight of Grust, an island nation on the western end of the Archanean continent, which is an ally of the Duller Empire, Archanea's big, bad, evil empire. Prior to Fire Emblem 1's events, Duller invaded the kingdom of Archanea, and with Camus leading the charge, they defeated the kingdom's armies and executed its royal family, sparing only the Princess Nina. Camus manages to talk Nina down from committing suicide, instead inspiring her to live on and one day lead her kingdom, strong enough to help the people in ways her selfish father was unable to, and she's taken into Camus' custody, kept prisoner in her own nation's capital. She would remain there for 2 years, and in that time, she and Camus would grow quite close to each other. But after those 2 years, the main villain of Archanea, Dragon Emperor Medeus, decided that leaving Nina alive was more trouble than it was worth, so he sent an order to have her killed. Camus managed to sneak her out of Grust's clutches and into the care of Hardin, a man who would always be a stalwart and kind ally, and then Camus went back to Grust. He was stripped naked and put in a cage to be mocked for betraying Duller, but Medeus knew he was too powerful to execute, so he kept him alive to be a tool and kept him on a very short leash. A decision that Medeus certainly will not regret in the future. And after about half a year, the events of Fire Emblem 1 happen. If you want to learn more about Camus, look up the BSFE episodes, or the fans' translation of the BSFE episodes' renditions in Fire Emblem 12. There's a lot of solid stuff in there. As for his appearance on Fire Emblem 1 on the good old Famicom, Camus stands out for a number of reasons. He's built up throughout the entire game, with Nina mentioning him by name a few times, and there are a few villagers and pre-chapter things that talk about his group of knights, the powerful Sable Order, and Camus himself even appears to Marth in a village to thank him for helping Hardin and Nina. So he's built up as a genuinely nice guy who should also be feared with his elite military unit. And when you finally meet that elite unit on the battlefield, Nina tries to convince him to join her and Marth, but he refuses, saying that Grust needs him now more than ever, and saying he will die a proud knight of his kingdom. And die he does, being slain in battle by... I don't know, let's just say Castor. And while his dialogue and backstory to the context of FE1 is fairly minimal, what makes him interesting in that game, even if none of the others happened, is the fact that there's a man who gets recruited on the very same map that Camus dies on. And the fact that this guy shows up on Camus' map is definitely no coincidence. I'm talking about the Grustian General, the old warhorse known as Lorenz. Lorenz is also a man who started a trend of reusing Fire Emblem Taco Bell ingredients, as his archetype is characterized by older men who are willing to change their ways despite their loyalty to their country. As this is the first example of this, Lorenz is fairly simple. He's an old man who's a knight of Grust just like Camus, but unlike Camus, when he's confronted with the fact that he's fighting on the wrong side, he decides that to save his country, he'll have to fight against it, taking up his lance to defeat Grust in the Duller Empire and worrying about what to do with Grust after the fact. Now, putting these two men in the same chapter is definitely on purpose, and the statement that you can draw from it feels pretty easy to analyze. It's a lesson on stubbornness versus flexibility. Camus was unwilling to change his beliefs, so because of this, he's stubborn, he's dead, and he probably smells bad. Lorenz was willing to change sides when presented with new information, so because of this, he's cool, he's alive, and he probably smells like a spring breeze. The moral of the story can easily be applied in many ways. Just as the basic concepts of don't be a stubborn jackass, you could also apply it in the context of a lesson about being patriotic versus being fanatic, or there could be some effort of not judging a book by its cover, as Camus is the pretty young blonde man who would normally be saving the day and is instead destroying it, while Lorenz is the old war vet, a group mostly known for their stubborn ways and love of Creedence Clearwater Revival, but he's willing to change when he needed to. There are a lot of ways you can interpret why Camus and Lorenz are on the same chapter, but no matter which way you do, I think it's a solid bit in Fire Emblem 1's story. It does a whole lot with a little bit of dialogue, which is kind of what everything good in Arcanea does. And if that was all there was, Camus' character would be a decent character with a decent lesson, but that's not all to him. Fire Emblem 1 is not the only Arcanea game, and Camus makes a return in Fire Emblem Gaiden, washing up on the shores of the continent of Valentia alive because... honest to God, I don't know. The canon reason seems to be that the lance he wields, the legendary Gradivus, has healing powers, so he just held on to that the entire time his unconscious body drifted across the ocean. But he drops it in Fire Emblem 1, and it goes into the player's inventory, so he couldn't have been holding it. Look, I can either spend 5 years debating the logistics of whether or not it was possible for Camus to survive, or I can just hand-wave it by saying, it's fantasy, it doesn't need to make sense. What matters is, he is rescued by a woman named Tatiana, and he suffers from amnesia. He doesn't even remember his own name, now going by Zeke. He was taken in by Emperor Rudolf of Rigel, where he becomes a knight once more and ends up marrying Tatiana. As Final Fantasy VII has taught us, amnesiac blonde men are in high demand among women. Honestly, Camus in Fire Emblem 2 doesn't really offer anything to analyze. He exists to be a plot twist that he's alive, and then he'll come back in Fire Emblem 3 to actually do stuff important. All he does in Fire Emblem 2 is serve as an exposition dump for Ulm. Not bad, but not really something to analyze. Actually, wait. Before we move on to Fire Emblem 3, I can say one interesting thing about him. His recruitment. What you're supposed to do is go east of where you fight him and save Tatiana, who's being kept prisoner and used as a bargaining chip for Camus to fight against you. But if you just ignore Tatiana and go fight Camus, you can kill him. And the dialogue of the villagers in the town he was watching change into scathing criticism of Alm. Essentially, they all tell him to go fuck himself for killing Zeke, which in my opinion is a really neat detail, and it's a way to make the player know they fucked up. It's just a shame that most people are going to miss that because, well, why wouldn't you just save Tatiana? It's still cool though. You guys saved General Zeke, huh? Although I hate Sophia, I've got to thank you guys. Emperor Rudolph is a hero. Can you Sophian pigs even comprehend the Emperor's greatness? General Jerome was a cruel man. Even this village was plundered and run amok. Until Lord Zeke came, it was terrible. You fucking bastards are ogres! Lord Zeke's lover was taken hostage. He had no choice but to fight. For as little as $3 a month, you can go to patreon.com/FVMSPaint and help support the channel. And you can join such patrons as Adebayo Thompson, Alex Orliga, Amu is not beating the tails allegations, Andrew Crockett, Bean Juice, Benz again, Dr. McBackstab, Hell on Heelys, Despacito 2, Lar Machi, Lysevening Bolt, Lindis Mai, Natsume Terumi, Susano, The Divine Warrior, Kobo Kaneru, Lambda 11, and Takane Lu in a trench coat, Marth War Criminal, Morga Lorgan, Played Arrow, Played is pronounced like the pattern, Ranger Man Sam, Shen Lu, Veery the Artist, Your Girl Olwyn, Brentendo 11, Drew Hack, Fire Emblem Lord, Ginger, Gugu Gaga, Cornelia Milkers 92, Inverse, Lev Ravrik, Maple Knight, and Upscale Furry Trash. Thank you all for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one. Something tells me the fan translation took a few liberties on that one. Sometime after the events of Fire Emblem 2, Camus gets word of Hardin's rise to power and insanity back on Arcanea, and decides he needs to help Grust once more. So he dons a mask and sails over to his homeland to fight. Now, why does his design in this game look like a barely legally distinct Char Ansible, you may ask? Easy, because Fire Emblem is Gundam. All video games can be broken down into either being Sentai or Gundam. The Tales of franchise? Sentai. Tactics Ogre? Gundam. Ratchet & Clank, despite being in space with giant robots, is Sentai. And Fire Emblem, despite being about superheroes with vibrant primary colors, is Gundam. Camus, now under his third name Sirius, appears early on in the game to help protect Grust's young prince and princess, Ubello and Ubella, from Hardin's clutches, meeting with Ogma briefly and denying that he's anyone Ogma could possibly recognize. After that, he disappears into your barracks almost never to be seen again. Typical classic Fire Emblem stuff. But while Camus himself doesn't do anything in the story until the final chapter, the story of FE3 still involves him indirectly through the legend of Henri. Now, I made a whole video on Henri a few weeks ago, and something I glossed over is the tragedy of the Fire Emblem, which is actually quite relevant to Camus. Henri is Arcanea's great historical figure, who's known throughout the land as a hero, who sealed away the evil Medeus years prior to the game's events, but his personal life was quite troubled. He was in love with a princess, but due to his status as a commoner and other factors beyond his control, he and her were unable to marry, and he ended up staying single his whole life, with his brother carrying on a lineage that would eventually become Marth. Now Camus, in this way at least, is meant to mirror Henri. In fact, Medeus even compares the two of them in BSFE, saying Camus is the hardest he struggled against someone since Henri, which honestly makes his decision to keep Camus alive all the stranger, but nevertheless. Just like Henri, Camus was torn from the woman he loved by circumstances well beyond his control. But what makes this tragedy important, in my opinion, is that it isn't really a tragedy for Camus specifically. don't get me wrong, what happens with Nina does pain him, but in the grand scheme of his life, Camus soldiers on and finds new happiness. He doesn't let the sorrow of what once was weigh him down. When his memories return to him after Fire Emblem Gaiden, he doesn't burden Tatiana with them. He's content in the new life that he has now. Hell, he probably wouldn't even have gone back to Arcanea if not for Grust heirs. He was 100% ready to live his new life, which is a lesson I personally value greatly. I adore characters who undergo horrific things, but still manage to fight through it to find a happy ending. There's a reason my favorite piece of fiction is Berserk, and Camus embodies that idea very well in my opinion. Plus, the fact that Camus had all but completely moved on makes Hardin's jealousy of him even sadder. Hardin was scared of a man who could not have been less bothered if he tried, so Camus' character makes that tragic downfall even worse, which of course makes Hardin even better, because honestly, I love fucked up little guys too, and Hardin's one of the most fucked up in the series. Poor bastard. Camus also tries to impart the idea of moving on to Nina at the end of Fire Emblem 3. Nina is under the magical control of Medeus, and it's Camus' words that break her free. She doesn't recognize him at first, but it doesn't take long talking to him for her to realize that he's Camus behind that mask. He shuts down her attempts to rekindle the relationship, continually lying and saying he's not Camus, even though he knows she doesn't believe him. He tells her not to give up, and that he's going to leave once more, as someone is waiting for him back home, and Nina has to accept this, tying a bow on the tragic love triangle between her, Hardin, and Camus. His character ending in Fire Emblem 3 is quite simple. He vanished without a word, which normally feels like a cop-out ending, especially in Arcanea, they're everywhere, but for Camus specifically, it's actually a happy one. He tied up the loose ends he needed to, and then he went home to the new life he created for himself. Despite all the parallels to the tragedy of the Fire Emblem and Henri, he managed to live his life happily. But, okay, what about the original message I was talking about from Fire Emblem 1? The duality between Camus and Lorenz kinda goes out the window if Camus is still alive, right? And even more so that Lorenz dies during the events of FE3. Well, I still think it holds up in Fire Emblem 1, but in the grand scheme of things, I see it as giving a new message. The purpose behind one's actions. Camus might have fought against Marth, but his heart always beat for the people of Grust. He wanted to help its people, and he thought the best way to do that was to fight for them, and as long as he drew breath, he might still be able to convince his king, who honestly was more of a coward than an evil man, to fight for the right side. He might have still been able to fight against Medeus and protect his home. He fought on the wrong side in the end, but his good heart never wavered. And Lorenz, too, did what he thought was the right thing to the very end. So I think that it reads as a new message, that as long as you don't lose sight of what you fight for, you'll find your way eventually, no matter how many twists and turns you go through, which I think is also a lesson worth telling, and again is very important in regards to Lorenz, as both of them wind up in a different place, but achieving the same goal. The remakes of Fire Emblem 1 and 3 don't exactly add anything to Camus, but rather enhances what was already there. Shadow Dragon can now work with the lore that was added in Fire Emblem 3 and BSFE, so Nina and Camus can talk about their history in a more organic way than they did in Fire Emblem 1, and Camus is able to be built up much better as a result. A lot of Camus' character was in a lot of different sources, so putting them all together in one, in what is, in my opinion, the definitive telling of Fire Emblem 1's story, definitely helps make his character flow better. Fire Emblem 3 adds some support conversations for him with Chris and Belf, which are cute, but don't amount to too much. it gives another reason for Camus to hide his identity, as he tells Belf that if Camus was somehow still alive, the people of Grust would use him as a revolution symbol against his will, and he doesn't want that to happen. Which, sure, I can buy that. It actually does have one sweet scene where Camus finally breaks character and gives Belf earnest support, which is nice to see a gentler, more encouraging side to Camus that he didn't really have time to show before. None of it really feels necessary, but it still feels nice. Fire Emblem Echoes, FE2's remake meanwhile, actually does a lot for Camus. Not that they necessarily do anything to Camus himself, but more so, they make Tatiana an actual character. In Gaiden, she was just kind of Camus' wife, who got kidnapped, and that was it. Now, she has this personality of being kind of a ditz, constantly goofing up in all kinds of ways, but because she always has her heart in the right place, people respect her earnestness. And Camus himself is also very touched by her kindness, that he always cheers her on even when she messes up. It's a simple dynamic, but it turned kind of a nothing pairing into one of Fire Emblem's sweeter canonical couples. Plus, for those of you that like angst, there's a tension between the two of them in some of their scenes where they fear what happens if Camus' memories return. Tatiana fears he might remember another lover and leave her forever, but Camus assures her that there is no room in his heart for anyone but her. It's very charming with very little dialogue, something Echoes is the best in the business at. The only weird thing about his portrayal in Echoes is that it states that canonically, Conrad gives Camus the mask he wears as Sirius, which is odd because Conrad's mask and Sirius's mask are clearly two different masks. Honestly, that's a bigger plot hole than wondering how the hell he ended up in Rigel. Calling Camus a member of the Camus archetype, funny enough, feels somewhat disingenuous, as after Fire Emblem 1, he does so much more that calling him the same kind of character as Eldigan or Brunya seems really unfair to them. But what he does show, whatever you want to call him, is that no matter how great the tragedy, a better life is possible if you work for it, and I think that lesson alone is worth praise. It just goes to show that no matter how old a trope, there's still something to be gained by looking back to where it all began. Cheers to the Black Knight Camus! You know what? The hell with it. Cheers to him and all the Black Knights. All hail their really cool looking armor. Before this video ends, I would like to thank all of you for making it to the end of another character analysis episode. I appreciate the support, and who knows, maybe the next episode will come out sooner than 3 months. Or not. Who could know these things? As always, I would also like to thank my buddy, Lady the Green Brigand. That's right, it's been so long since the last episode, my script reader has transed her gender. Good for her. Love ya, thank you for the support. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, following me on Twitter or Blue Sky, or joining my Discord server. Links to all of them are in the description below, and you're looking at the Discord server right now. We have a good time there, I strongly recommend giving it a look. Until next time.
Change the world. My final message.